Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Voyager Season 2, Episode 4, Elogium. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek podcast.
That is correct. And as I say, every single week you should find us and follow us because we're great, we're awesome, we're a good time. And yes, this is a now official just Star Trek podcast. We covered all of Deep Space Nine. And though I may miss it, because that's not the first time I made that slip tonight, we're not going back to it unless we're doing like comparisons and stuff. We're not quite there yet for that. So as David said, we are talking about Season 2 episode Elogium. This one is kind of a interesting entry into the overall Trek family there. And I don't know. It's just an unusual episode for Voyager too, I feel. Before we get into all that, we'd like to give ourselves a chance to catch up with each other, check in. Sometimes this is the only time we've gotten to speak to each other in the week. But this is not true in this instance. We've seen quite a bit of each other this last week, I would say.
Right.
We were doing the workouts, and then we went and saw the Odyssey tonight.
Yep.
Rushed back just to be able to do this show for you all. So appreciate it.
We did. Yep. Yeah. We talked a little bit outside the theater afterward about our responses to the Odyssey. Do we want to talk about it real quick and give our thoughts, or?
Yeah, why not? I know that you've seen it twice. That your second time was with me there, and that was my first time seeing it. I'm a big fan of the Greek myth. I learned about it in both high school and college. Obviously, a deeper dive in college. So going to watch this now after all this time, this is like the first time I've done anything with the myth really since college. So that was nice to see how much I could remember. There were some parts of it that were new to me, or just things I couldn't remember, which I'm going to look forward to going back and looking up. But overall, I really enjoyed the movie. I thought that the way that Nolan told the story was great. I think it was an interesting one, something I hadn't really heard of before in this telling of, the loss of a culturally significant practice and a different way of viewing Odysseus and the survivors of the Trojan War on their trek back home and everything else, and seeing how, the framing of time for everything really does, alter the perspective of people. That was a almost too subtle of a message that if it wasn't for certain things kind of really pushing it into the forefront, you would be forgiven for forgetting it that it happened. But the more I thought about it on the ride home, then even when I first got here, I just really quickly looked up a couple of things. I really just liked that tie-in that they used there. Trying to be kind of vague because it is still a relatively new movie. Don't want to offer up any spoilers. We may come back and do a little, talk, recap, whatever about that movie in the coming weeks once it's been out for a little bit, because I think it is an interesting movie to talk about. But overall, I'm just going to say I really enjoyed it. I was surprised because I had read some reviews before going to see the movie. I try to avoid reviews, but I did see some, and they were mixed to negative at best. I just really enjoyed it. What did you think?
Yeah, so the first time I saw it on Wednesday by myself because I was able to catch an IMAX viewing. I found a seat. It was isolated, and, IMAX is how they filmed it, so it's like, go see it in IMAX. So I saw it, and then you and I saw it tonight because I was like, I want to see it again. We talked about seeing it together, so I did that. My reaction is a little bit more mixed. I just had read the Odyssey, as I've mentioned before. So having just read it, I did not care for the Odyssey as a poem as much as it sounds like you enjoyed it more. I just found it, as I kind of said to you after we got out of the theater, because it's not Greek, I'm reading an English translation, I can't appreciate it for its original prose, and, the prose of it. All I can appreciate it for is character and plot. And I wasn't like a huge fan of Odysseus in the poem. Like I just find the idea of his character being the hero a little bit interesting because he's constantly deceptive in the poem. The very first thing he and his men do in the poem after sacking Troy is they sack a sea village on the way home. Now they portray that in the movie, but I feel like they did a better job in the movie of it, like making a point of that scene and then using that as a part of the overall theme of the movie. So I liked that the movie gave a better theme. Like at the end of the film, there's like a scene that like ties the whole movie together. Like what's the movie about?
Yeah.
When he gets back home and he's talking with his wife. You know, he hasn't revealed himself yet, but he's like talking to her. And he gives the scene a flashback scene about what he's put on his mind. I like that scene a lot. It made my viewing of my first viewing a lot better because at first I was more comparing the movie to the poem the whole time. So, for example, the Cyclops scene in the original poem is different than the movie. The movie,
Yeah, way different.
Yeah, I would argue that I think that that's actually a mistake by taking basically the Cyclops in the poem talks. He is a rational being.
Yeah, in the poem, they have a couple of nights together, and
Yes.
Odysseus talks to the Cyclops. His name is Polyphemus, and
Yes.
he talks to him and gets him drunk. And
Yes.
when Polyphemus asks who he's talking to, because he's so entertained by Odysseus, he's so entertained by him, he's asking, "Who are you? What's your name?
Right.
Whatever." And Odysseus always responds, "Nobody, I'm nobody." And he says it over and over again. And so then when the blinding scene happens, Polyphemus starts to scream to Poseidon and to his brothers, which is nothing we didn't really see in the movie. There
Right.
are other Cyclopi, whatever. There are multiples on this island.
Yes.
And Polyphemus is actually the smallest of his brethren. And he begins to holler out for them to help him, and they deny him. And then he begs Poseidon to get his vengeance, and he asks, "Who has hurt you? Who has wronged you?" And he says, "Nobody. Nobody's hurt me. Nobody's hurt me."
Right.
And that's why his brothers and Poseidon kind of blow him off, because he keeps saying nobody's blinded him. Nobody has done this to him, so they don't know who. And then that's actually the fatal flaw in the poem is Odysseus, his hubris builds up, and he just can't let it go that he has bested this giant, the son of Poseidon. So he has to holler out that it was I, Odysseus, who has blinded you. Right. And that's the beginning of the curse for the crew.
Right. And so that is all really important, I feel, because, again, for those who aren't aware, just minor spoilers, but the reason the Cyclops scene is so terrifying is because he's a cannibal. He eats some of Odysseus's men. And in the poem, I mean, it's horrifying, but like he does it a lot. He eats, I think, up to like 6 guys every time he does it. I think
he eats a good number of them. Like Odysseus from what I remember in the poem, he comes in with a lot of his crew. It's not like just a random handful. Right. He comes in with a lot of them because they're trying to get all of the sheep.
Exactly.
And he's like, "Yeah, we're gonna need all of you guys to get these guys." And then it even gets to a point where it's kind of like Odysseus is saying, "Hey, Polyphemus, like, go ahead, eat this guy," because he knows it's going to help him relax and give him the greater advantage down the road. So he's willingly sacrificing his men so that the rest of them can escape. So yeah, the poem, and depending on the tellings that you get and whatever else, they do really go heavy-handed on trying to make Odysseus seem like he's this really clever, strategic-minded person, you know. But I feel like the movie kind of departed from that in some ways.
Yeah, I would say that the reason I'm talking about this scene in particular is because I feel it's more horrifying to encounter an intelligence that engages in cannibalism than just he's a simpleton in the movie, or at least at the very least he doesn't have speech. They don't reason with the creature. He just grabs some guys and starts chomping down. Now, that's horrifying in a classic monster sense. You know, it's a dumb brute that, you know, is willing to eat his guys. But I feel like part of the horror of the original story is that this creature is talking and rational.
Yeah.
And I think, again, just to go back to my main point, is that the overall theme that the end of the movie then, it ties together in that last scene. I feel like that would make a little more sense if basically, Odysseus was cursed to go visit the Cyclops because of what the end of the movie is talking about. Like, basically, Odysseus hasn't been a good, quote unquote, host at times, per se. And so he gets cursed with not cursed the whole meeting with the Cyclops is an example of the theme of the film.
Yeah, he's the other side of it. The way I always took it was there's this rule about how you treat guests, but there's also a rule about how guests are supposed to act when they enter your home, your land, and so forth. And Odysseus has been a bad guest,
right?
And then while he's traveling and being a bad guest at his home, he's got other guests who are being bad guests, and so it's a interesting theme to use, but not one that is typically highlighted in the overall epic of the Odyssey itself.
Right.
Now, again, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about that because we really could, and we've got a lot of
we definitely could
to get to.
But so I'll say it this way: I do like it, but this is an example. Christopher Nolan is primarily known for original storytelling. There are a few examples of not. For example, The Prestige. I have not read the book that The Prestige is based on. I love the movie The Prestige. I think it's great. I don't know what the differences are from book to movie. But in this case, because I had read The Odyssey beforehand, that was in my head the whole time. And in some ways, that made my first viewing kind of, frustrating because I'm like comparing it the whole time. The second time, I was able to just enjoy it because I already know what's going to happen overall. So anyway, so anyone who wants to see it, go see it. There are some controversies around the casting and things like that. I'll just say this: like, Christopher Nolan just commits to a race-neutral casting. He doesn't care where the hell you're, technically, where you're from. The cast is overall racially diverse in a way that would not have made sense at the time. But, if you've heard people complain about it, I mean, it's throughout the entire casting. So just kind of either swallow the pill and watch it or don't because you don't like that idea.
And I'll do you one better. The Trojan War never happened, guys. It's a made-up story. It's not real. It's not real. Say that again. It is not real. Now, did a city called Troy exist? Sure. Is Sparta real? Is Ithaca real? I think as far as we can tell, yes. But as to everything else that follows in it, the Trojan War, the Trojan horse, Athena, Zeus, Poseidon, all not real. Yeah. So if you have a problem with someone being cast in a role because of their skin color or because you, for some reason, think that they didn't exist in that time period, it's not real. There were no one-eyed Cyclops giant things. There was no Circe witch. There's no Calypso. There's no multi-headed monster called Scylla. None of these things were real, okay? Right. So I need you all to collectively shut up. Watch the movie. Enjoy the movie. And shut up. I don't want to hear it. If your whole argument for why you don't like the movie is because it's not historically accurate, when you show me the skull of a Cyclops, I'll believe you. But until then, shut up. All right. There's the argument.
All right. Yeah. I didn't mean to set you off, but
I hate it so much. It's the same kind of stuff that we get in Star Trek a lot of the times, like with Voyager, for example, when Tim Russ was cast as Tuvok, everybody flipped their shit because he was black and you can't have a black Vulcan, blah 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 blah. Oh my God! And then when science proved that not only could you have a black Vulcan, but you should have a lot of them, they were like, well. Okay, well, it's science fiction. Oh, well, now you're willing to accept that. So, yeah, it's not real, folks. It's not real. Vulcans don't exist, at least as far as we know. They're not real. Talaxians, Beta Zeds, Bajorans, as far as we're concerned, not real. All made up. So shut up about race. Watch the show. Enjoy the show. That's it. Now, to that end, before we get into this show, I did get to catch the season 4 premiere of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Um, I think it was a great opener, a great season 4 opener for a show that has been plagued with being stuck in a very specific part of the Star Trek franchise timeline and having to worry about how they're going to, cross over certain things to tick off certain boxes and really having to pay a lot of attention to what came before. This was the first episode I feel like that really got them out of that to a certain degree. We weren't having to watch an episode wondering, who's going to do what or whatever, because we already know from the 60s that XYZ happened during that stuff. It was just a chance for them to tell an original new story. Now, they do basically set themselves up as, the saviors of existence as we know it. But it was, again, an interesting new take on that kind of were there aliens in our solar system before humans stuff.
Right.
Okay. So if you're a fan of that whole thing where, I know there's a sci-fi subsect. It's all about how Mars used to have a population before, and then something happened and all the Martians died and whatever else. This kind of gets into that a little bit. Well, no, actually a lot of it. But again, it's not a story that's been done in Trek before. They're not treading on the toes of any other Trek episode in telling the story. That's why I liked it. I thought special effects were great. I really just was kind of enjoying all of that. So again, if you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's actually pretty good. A pretty solid season opener. Now, as we know, they've already wrapped production on Strange New Worlds. This is season 4. There is a season 5, but after that, that's it. There's no more Trek. There have been rumors of a new movie in the works. This movie is going to be a launching of an all-new cast and crew and everything else. No word yet on where it's going to fall on the timeline or any of that stuff, but the only main thing they seem to be focusing on is that they want to move forward, at least cast-wise, not worrying about legacy characters at all. And it is going to be a movie, not a TV show. So that's about it that's come out on that. I believe that we will probably get more information as we get closer to Star Trek's 60th anniversary in September, because that will be a pretty huge announcement, because by then there will be no new Trek on. Strange New Worlds season 4 will already have ended by then. There's no other Trek in production. So it'll be a nice break between the end of Strange New Worlds and September. And then they'll probably want to launch some new Trek information at that time. So stay tuned for the September big announcement. But we're not here to talk about all those things. We are here to talk about Star Trek Voyager. The episode is Elysium. We are already at our kind of 20-minute mark. Do you want to give the recap, or do you want me to do it?
It's a little bit complicated. Why don't you do it? There's a lot of funky words that I'm sure you can remember a little better than me.
and we'll get into some of that as we talk about it, but I will be rather brief because I do want to give us ample time to talk about the episode. So this is a very straightforward episode. Little bit of a B plot, but it mixes very well with the A plot. So we're just going to call it all one thing. In this episode, we see Chakotay encounters some crew members in a turbolift making out. Of course, when they see their commanding officer, one of their commanding officers, they get a little flustered and they stop. Shortly after that, Paris and Kes come into the turbolift with Chakotay. They're laughing. Obviously, they've been having a good time hanging out with each other. No big deal, it seems. They drop off some stuff to Neelix in the mess hall, to which Neelix becomes incredibly jealous because it's clear to him, anyway, that Tom is flirting with Kes.
Yep.
Meanwhile, Janeway and crew on the bridge are investigating some weird creatures that they have found floating through space. Little worm-like looking creatures, which, again, existing in the vacuum of space is very unusual. Decide to follow them. They are emitting some kind of strange radiation energy, but nothing that the ship can't handle. So they decide to follow along, figure it out, and eventually they end up getting drawn into this densely collected mass of worm creatures.
Mhm.
Um, Again, nothing terribly worrisome at this time, but the energy that they're giving off begins to affect Kess, of all people. Kess starts eating strange things. First, she's eating some beetles, then she's eating mashed potatoes with butter that she puts dirt in. She's eating a bunch of apples. Basically, she's just eating a lot of stuff.
They look more like onions to me. I think she was. I
She's
mean,
eating everything. She ate
yeah.
plums, some pear-looking things. She ate the flowers because Neelix shows up trying to apologize. She ate the flowers that Neelix brought her. Clearly, she's having some kind of issue. He takes her to sick bay. The doctor is trying to do an examination, but Neelix, being Neelix, is in the way. Doctor kicks him out. Neelix goes to the bridge to complain, and that's when Janeway finally becomes alerted to Kess's situation. But before she can get a whole lot of information from Neelix, who's really just pissed off that the doctor, a holographic being, has kicked him out of sickbay, the doctor calls. He's like, hey, problem in sickbay. Janeway goes down. Kess is there. She's flipping out. She's locked the doctor out of his office. The captain talks to her, gets her to lower the force field to allow her in. And then Kess begins to explain that she's going through something her people call the Elogium. The Elogium is their equivalent of puberty. Captain tries to calm her down and say, yeah, humans go through something very similar, but Kess tells her, no, it's not the same. You don't understand. I'm developing a mitral sac on my back, which for my people is the signifier that we're ready to produce offspring. This only happens once in our lifetime, so if I'm ever to have a child, I have to do this now. Now, the problem with this is this typically happens for an Ocampan between their 4th and 5th year. Keep in mind, Ocampans don't live very long. Kess isn't even 2 years old yet, and she's already going through this process. The doctor believes that it is because of the electrophoretic radiation that is surrounding the ship, which is infecting her, which is causing her body to speed up all of its various processes. So Kess now has a decision to make. She's got about 40 to 50 hours to figure out if she actually wants to become a parent. She decides that she does. She wants Neelix to mate with her. Neelix is very hesitant to do so because he doesn't think he's ready to be a parent. He brings up the fact that she is so young, which I thought was a little creepy considering he's supposed to be the one in a relationship with her. And it's like, now you want to bring up her age as a problem? You didn't have a problem with it before, but now when she wants to have a baby, you got a problem. But whatever.
We'll talk about that.
We will. Now, the bridge staff is still dealing with these worms. They're trying to figure out their way out. The worms seem to be attracted to the warp signature of Voyager. They try to use information to get away from them, but it doesn't really work. And just as they think they're starting to make progress with at least moving through the cloud, another much bigger version of these worm things shows up. It is very hostile, very aggressive towards Voyager, even to the point at one point of ramming Voyager. Before they figure out that basically while this is a spaceborne species, it's a very primitive species, and they're responding to Voyager in the same way that they would respond to a potential mate or suitor. And so Voyager at first tries to fight, but then Chakotay points out, hey, we're acting in a very dominant, aggressive role, and this larger creature is responding to us in kind. Maybe if we behave in a more submissive manner, kind of like the smaller versions, we may be able to escape this thing and get out of here.
Right.
So they do. This involves them having to change their color, and which they do by releasing some warp residue, I believe that Harry calls it. Mm-hmm. And then the ship has to do a barrel roll so that they're kind of belly up, showing that supplicant, submissive posture to the larger creature.
And we'll have to talk about that as well. But
yes. Yeah. So they do this, which allows them to escape, to which Tuvok, of course, says, we appear to have lost our sex appeal, Captain. So they escape from this, and at the same time, Kess and Neelix have also decided to go ahead and try to reproduce. They begin her Relicicin, which is the name of the ceremony that Ocampans go through in order to prepare themselves for mating. once all that's done, though, right before she can actually be impregnated, Voyager escapes, and the doctor basically says that her bodily processes will go back to normal, and there's no reason to think that she won't be able to develop like a normal Ocampan, and when she is between the ages of 4 and 5, actually truly be ready to produce a child. Neelix is a little bit sad, heartbroken, I guess, because he finally wrapped his mind around being a father. But then he gets happy when she tells him that it could happen again for them in the future. And he decides, yes, I definitely want to do it, and I want us to have a girl. The episode also touches on the fact that Voyager is lost and may need replacement crew. Chakotay and the captain talk about this, and they're basically like, yeah, we're probably going to need, if our trip's going to take us 75 years, we're probably going to need replacement crew in about half that time. Are we ready to turn Voyager into a generational ship? They don't definitively answer the question, but you're basically left to the assumption they're saying it's going to happen. Someone somewhere is going to get pregnant. And then, of course, the episode ends with Ensign Naomi Wildman. Samantha Wildman. I'm sorry. Foreshadowing. It's Samantha Wildman telling Captain Janeway that she is pregnant, and
by her husband, who's still on Deep Space Nine.
Yes, because they were only supposed to be gone for 3 weeks. They didn't think it was a big deal that she'd be gone on this mission because she'd be back in 3 weeks. But now, obviously, not 3 weeks. Right. So, and the captain just ends it by saying, "Congratulations," and that's it. Right. That's the episode. That's essentially it. We're going to get into the rest of it, but there you go.
Yep.
What did you think of Elogium?
Yeah, I actually like this one. I was seeing stuff here on Wikipedia that some people give it more of a controversial review. I like this episode because I feel, I mean, there are some critiques, don't be wrong, I'll get there. But overall, I liked it because it gives us more on Kes, gives us a fairly realistic alien species that they would encounter. I mean, it's another one of those. There's an electromagnetic anomaly off on the port side. So it's another one of those in a sense, but it wasn't a nebula. It had a pretty believable storyline there. Again, there's some minor critiques I can make. We'll get to it in a bit. The Kes stuff, I thought was interesting. I do think it was way over dramatized to an extent. Again, I'll get into that a little bit. But overall, it asked the most important question: what the heck are we going to do with a crew that's going to be stuck on a ship for 75 years, supposedly, if we're not all going to, go join the 36s, the 30, what was it, 38s or 37s? The 37s on their, humanoid, their human civilization, whatever they've done. We're going to have to seriously consider what we're going to do with the people who are still on the ship, etc. Now, apparently this episode was supposed to be part of season 1. This is one of those episodes that got dragged over. So overall, I like the idea of the questions that were asked. I think the sci-fi element was fairly realistic. Neelix was realistic in his reaction. Again, I'm not a huge fan of Neelix as a character, but his reactions throughout were realistic. The problem with Kes's storyline is that it really got weird. I feel like it's more of an example of maybe men over dramatizing the weirdness of women and their biological changes and what it means to be a woman as a woman who gets pregnant. I mean, the idea that she starts eating beetles and all these weird things, and that her hands get weird residue on them, and she gets kind of when she locks herself in the doctor's office, it seems like she reverts to a more barbaric form of herself for a time. I think that's a little bit much. I mean, it's obviously done because this is a show and you need some sort of drama. So on one level, and the initial part of all that is you're wondering if there's a problem. Like, for example, are the beetles doing something to her that's causing her to ingest them? But overall, it's an interesting idea. Now, the other problem, of course, with Kes is that, when you try and compare how old she is to human years, the idea that she's not even 2, and I guess they live to maybe about 10 at most,
Yeah, 9 to
It's
10 years old seems to be. See,
yeah. This
the
is a
problem with a rapidly developing species like what we're seeing here with Ocampans is you don't know their level of knowledge and experience.
right.
And I think that this was an attempt to capture something along the lines of um, what someone thought of as true virginal innocence. But the problem is it's just poorly executed because we don't understand the year cycle. Like if she only lives to be 9 years old, does that mean that 1 year for her is the equivalent of 10 for us?
Right.
Or because like what was the development? Was she born on Monday and then by Friday was she already up and
An
walking and
adult.
speaking?
Yeah.
Right. Like there's they don't do a great job, or do they have a normal development and then reach some kind of weird homeostasis where they no longer change for several years? They just stay Thor forever,
Right.
Thor for the next 40 years, and then all of a sudden it's 5 through 10 and you're done. Like
Right.
there's not enough, we're not given enough to understand her age process.
Right.
But they do try very hard to hammer home that she is very young, but
Yes.
also has this kind of otherworldly ability to learn and adapt and be a part of culture. And she's got all these insights and all this stuff. So you can't have it both ways. You can't have a truly young, naive character and also have someone who's worldly enough to understand sex and um,
Yeah.
all
I'm.
that stuff. And especially since she was also pulled away from her people before she could reach an age where she would have been talked to about those things by her parents, doesn't make sense. It
Right.
causes a lot more problems than it's worth.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like this is an example of the pilot made a decision about her species. They only lived to be like 7 years old, so now the rest of the show has to contend with that little decision. Um, Now, as you pointed out during your recap, the plot is such that these alien creatures are emitting some sort of field that they suppose is causing her to prematurely go through this puberty like phase.
Mhm.
And that because they're able to get out of it, she's able to sort of revert. And the doctor supposes that maybe she'll be able to go through it properly at the right time. The only problem with all of this is that if you compare her to human biology at all, you know that that doesn't quite work. Like puberty is not something you can undo. Um, you don't start it, then stop, and then start again. And she looks like an adult woman anyway, because she's obviously played by an adult, obviously. So the idea that they basically had to come up with a bunch of kind of bizarre things. Like, for example, they have to be like she and Neelix will have to be physically touching on some level for
Yeah, they have
six
to
straight
be,
days.
their hands have to be joined so that enough genetic material can transmit through them and whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I really don't like this episode for that
Yeah.
because to me it was just very clear they were trying to have the sex talk, but they
Without.
just didn't know really how to handle it.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah,
It's an important conversation for these characters to actually have in universe, but yeah, they're having a hard time doing so in a way that maybe is like, I don't know, PG for TV. Um, I feel like they could have just done it again. My idea, what I'm saying is, I like the idea that they are having her go through something. Like, I'll put it this way: if they had just said, "Yes, she is going through her version of puberty," and maybe she and Neelix decide that they're not going to have kids. Well, part of the problem is they treat it as if this is a one and done thing. Like, if she doesn't have a kid right now, then that she can't have a kid later. As opposed to, like, obviously human biology where you go through puberty, but then you can have children, at least for a woman, for the next 20, 30 years. You don't have to do it right then and there. So it's one of those things like, again, I always want to give the authors kind of an opportunity to come up with a story and come up with something different. So I'm willing to make some give some leeway, but I do, as I've said now, I've explained already that there are some issues with the way they go about it. Um, the whole episode is basically revolving around this idea, though, is like sexual compatibility. What do we do about the generational ship idea? The episode ends with the character announcing that she's been pregnant. So I like the idea that this theme is throughout the episode. So I think overall, for me, it works. It for whatever reason, it works, and I can understand the bigger criticisms that some people have. I feel like some of them are a little bit harsh on here, but it sounds like this was intended to be the finale of season 1. Do you know if that's accurate?
I'm not really sure. I think it was close to the end of season 1. So if it was supposed to be the season 1 ender, that's fine too. It makes sense because we're starting to broach the subject of, again, Voyager potentially being a generational ship, people pairing off, all that kind of stuff, which does come into play later on in the subsequent seasons and talked about again in season later on here in season 2. So I could see that, but I don't recall if this was again just like the penultimate episode or the last one.
Right.
But either way, I think you made some great points here. Like I said, I think that another part of the problem too, and I've brought this up a lot. I'm going to continue to bring it up because it's just one of the few things I know, and a lot of this stuff fits. Is we are dealing with an era of Trek where the thought of sexualizing a lot of things was very prevalent. And so if we're thinking about the time that this episode would have been airing, Deep Space Nine was also on, and Deep Space Nine had a lot of very attractive female characters on it. And I think that they were wanting to have some of that on Voyager as well. So I also think that this was important for them to have this development with Kes, because when Kes is first presented to us in the pilot episode, they talk about it a lot, how young, how naive, how inexperienced she is, but she's so eager to get out in the world and see things and do things and be a part of things. I really think they were trying to get a way to like age her up a bit so they could play into this sex appeal of the character, but they were quickly realizing they were running into some very hard rules that were going to be problems for them, and that was mainly her age. It's very hard to equate allure, sex appeal, seduction, or whatever when you keep hearing, I'm not even 2 years old. I'm not even 2 years old. So it's like it's a kind of dissonance that they were going to have to overcome in some way. Also, unfortunately, Catherine Janeway, they weren't ready yet to really play into any kind of sex appeal when it comes to our captain. She's a female captain, first one that they featured on the show in a while, and they were really trying to lean into this whole, she's a lot like Picard, or she's a lot like Kirk, and she's a lot like they were trying to do things like that to draw people in to want to watch Voyager in the first place. So they didn't want to over-sexualize the captain for fear that it would turn people off of the show. The captain must command respect and authority, not be seen as this seductress roaming her way across the Delta Quadrant. So that didn't leave them with what they felt like was a whole lot of options, and Kes was the almost natural choice for that. But again, they're running into some issues. Now, do they solve their issues later on? That's up for other people to determine when we get there. So we'll see. But I think that was why they were having these issues so early on, because the show really had, put such a narrow focus on a lot of their female characters, and it left them with impossible moves to make to try to get that sex appeal. And at the time, the powers that be, looking at you, Berman, were like, we need it. The show needs sex. The show needs sex appeal. The show needs this kind of draw. And they were just not going to find it yet.
Right.
Now, I do want to talk a bit about Neelix, because Neelix is a problem in this episode. He is jealous of her, of Kess having any contact with other people, but in
Right.
particular, Tom Paris. The scene, they come into the mess hall, they're carrying all the various vegetables and everything else, and they set them down. Kess and Tom are laughing, whatever was so funny between them. We never heard a statement or a joke or anything. They just seem to be really enjoying each other's company and laughing. Neelix is all, they say bye, and Tom says, "Oh, I'll see you later." And then he's like, "You're going to be seeing him later," and just won't let it go. He's intensely jealous of Tom. When he goes to apologize to her later on, it's kind of the same deal. It's, I'm apologizing for being a jealous oaf, And then when she gets sick, he's overbearing in sick bay. And then, of course, on the bridge, again, he's just, the doctor kicked me out and all this kind of stuff. Neelix is problematic this whole episode. And I think this is the one that really sets up my basis for disliking his character.
Yeah, Neelix, part of the problem, I'll say it this way. The episode has him apologize to Kess very quickly. So he realizes his flaw and apologizes, and that kicks off the whole Kess is going through puberty plot line. But yes, you're totally right that the opening scene is, he is having a full-on jealous fit.
Yeah.
He is ripping up lettuce like he's got a real problem with it. She is with him. The character should be more mature enough. He should be mature enough, like in the scene. Like, I don't know. I'm trying to. If you like to have your characters be dramatic for drama's sake, but it also means the character comes off as childish. So, as a more adult, a mature response for the character would have been to notice this problem, and then her realize that he's feeling something. Like she later says to him at the end of the episode, "I think you're disappointed," and I like that scene. She doesn't say you are disappointed, or she says, "I think you are." She is a good partner in recognizing it and saying, "This is what I think." But by saying, "I think you're disappointed," she allows him to either deny that or agree to her assumption. So Neelix is a character who he's just awkward as a character choice. They've chosen to make him this awkward character, and that means that every time he's on screen, he's awkward, and it's not fun to watch awkward characters. It's just not. It can be fun to have a character in an awkward situation, but his whole character is about being awkward and just a bit strange. For example, he doesn't like mashed potatoes. It's like,
well, to be fair, she put dirt in the mashed potatoes. I don't think
that's
anybody would like
dirt flavored mashed potatoes. Yeah. All right. Fair enough.
I always found Neelix's jealousy to be problematic because when we first meet Neelix and Kess, it's clear that they've been in a relationship for some time. We don't know exactly how much time, but they've been in a relationship for some time. When Voyager shows up, that's a ship full of aliens, a ship full of unknowns. For him to think that she would be already romantically interested in one of them doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, exactly. That's another problem.
They've just encountered these people who, by all accounts, are going to be very strange. Sure, they could be nice people, but they're going to have way different cultures and social societal norms that they've never even heard of before. She's already made it clear that she's very comfortable and interested in Neelix. For her to suddenly move away from that and be with anyone else is ridiculous. He's making the situation worse by letting his jealousy push her towards other people.
Right.
So yeah, he's ridiculous. And I think that's why I always just found him so problematic when it comes to his dealings with Kess.
Yeah, the idea that she's with him at all comes off as, well, she didn't have much options in the pilot episode, so she's with him simply because of what her life was. And now that she basically would, again, she is not a sexually mature individual. Apparently, this whole episode is about that. So the problem of, oh, you're a sexually not mature character. Your not sexually mature character is in a committed relationship with someone who is. Like, it just opens up a whole can of worms. Now, again,
it really does. It doesn't do Neelix any favors.
Yeah, and again, for me, the reason I'm thinking about it is that, or like I'm willing to give it a little more of a pass for whatever reason, is because the episode was thematic. These are questions that make sense within the nature of the show. They might not have been answered very well, but they are at least addressing realistic concerns I can see happen. Of course, an alien sexual life cycle would be very alien to us, I can imagine. I'll put it this way. The aliens that the captain and the rest of the crew are dealing with outside the ship are very simple creatures. They come off as they're very, primordial almost. Like, they're very basic creatures. Well, Kes is a more, advanced alien species. So you can imagine there'd be more going on there. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's over the top. It seems to be a bad analogy for actual, human biology. But if there's just a part of me that wants to give this episode a bit of a pass in the sense of, like, the authors, the screenwriters are trying to do something legitimately original here. So, for whatever reason, I feel like giving this episode a little more leeway. I don't know if on a different day I might have watched this episode and not have felt the same way. Again, a lot of the Wikipedia page here is really hard on it. Apparently, Screen Rant says this is one of the top 10 worst episodes of Voyager. So apparently this is near the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, it's because of the Neelix plot line and the way his character reacts here. The sex stuff, just a lot of that stuff just came off as, well, problematic, and it doesn't age well. In fact, right. The older the episode gets, the more people go back and watch it, the more problems people find with the episode. What was once an entertaining little thing to watch now has become like, he's just kind of a creeper for this relationship. And in fact, it's harmed the legacy of the character of Neelix because of the fact that everybody's like, despite how we see Neelix develop over the show's run, no one can forget the fact that he did have this relationship with Kes that was, again, problematic at best. So,
right.
It's not a good episode. It's just not a good episode. They could have done more. Maybe if they had done more to explain a few things, if they had, maybe made Neelix a little less jealous and maybe quicker to be on board with her wanting to have a child and things along those lines, it might have been different, but it wasn't.
Well, I guess, for me, I like the fact that, again, Neelix is immature initially. Oh, I haven't really thought about having a kid before. But then he goes talks to Tuvok, and Tuvok gives him some of his
Which is a great scene. I love that development scene between Neelix and Tuvok. Yeah.
Exactly. And then, there's also the scene where Kes is talking with the doctor, but the doctor can't give her any good advice. All he can give her are studies. He cites some weird practices of some species, like if a woman gets pregnant in the first 4 decades, she's summarily executed. But the Breen are, as you said, they're
a warrior species. So
that's what it was.
The women get pregnant quickly.
Yeah, that's what it was. So, like, all he can do, because he's not a person like the rest of them are, he can't give her good advice. Now, that makes that scene a bit sad because she's desperately in need of some good advice. But what I'm getting at is that all of this weird alien being weird stuff is still circling around those actual questions that would be asked. I feel like those are legitimate questions to be asking in the episode, even if the execution was flawed at times. And again, I think you're saying too, like, Neelix is just Neelix as a character is
He's a problem. He's a
he's a
problem.
problem. I mean, I want to see if I can, as someone who wants to like fix the character, I'm trying to think of like what would I do. I mean,
Well, it's hard in these first episodes here, but I will tell you this. You're not the only one. And even back then, as they were working through the show, I think that there were enough writers who were on board who were like, look, this guy is going to be a problem for us if we don't do some work. So let's hold off on totally reserving our judgment of Neelix. We got a few more. We'll get a few more episodes in, maybe into next season. We'll come back and talk about the Neelix problem, because I mean it doesn't go away. It's just that they do enough to change certain things that it depends on how you want to look at it after that. So,
right.
But I'm glad that you did bring up that Tuvok scene because Tuvok is such a fascinating character. Right. We find out he's got 4 children. And he speaks about his family in a remarkably candid tone, which seems to come out of nowhere. Neelix comes to him for advice about children, and he's talking and telling him stuff, but then he goes into detail about his children, and in particular his daughter, whom he feels like gains a lot from him, and he's he's missing them, and it was just such a nice and touching scene for Tuvok,
right?
That I really think that it helped a lot of people to reframe how they looked at him, because by and large he was kind of one-dimensional, and as our Vulcan security guard he was kind of flat. And so now all of a sudden we get this depth here, and without him saying so, we can tell this is a man who really loves and misses his family, and in particular his children. It was a great scene.
Now, how old is Tuvok? He's like 300 years old or something, right?
He is in his late 90s.
90s, okay. So his children are presumably adults.
Yeah, we never get official ages, but I would say that between the 4 of them, you probably got one who's probably 30, and then he's got the youngest one who's probably late teens, early 20s.
Okay, and comparing that to human biology, is when you say teens, yes, teens as in number, but not as in human teens is like.
No, she'd probably be more akin to like maybe like a 10 or 11-year-old.
Okay. They do age slower than us.
Yeah. So I'm glad you actually brought this up. Okay, so I get to tell a little Trek lore. I love this.
Okay.
All right.
That's why
so there was
inspire
a book.
your Trek lore. Yeah, go ahead.
There's a book. It was called Pathways, and it's all about the Voyager crew. And I've talked about it before. It's a book again about the Voyager crew. It's a mission that they were on where they get stranded and they're separated from Captain Janeway and Voyager. So the whole senior staff is basically trapped and being held prisoner. And as a way to bolster spirits and keep themselves, ready for because they know Janeway's coming, they all sit around a campfire night after night and they tell their tale of their life and how they got to Voyager. And so in Tuvok's story, which was my favorite story, we find out all about, the fact that he had been in Starfleet a long time ago, and then he left for a good while before coming back. That's why he's a lieutenant, not a higher ranked individual at 90 years old.
Okay.
But the reason I bring this up now is because there's a particular part of the story where he does talk about his interactions with all of his children, and he's got 3 boys and 1 girl. And the boys all, they go off and they do different things. He's got a great relationship with like the oldest one and the middle one. But then the youngest boy is kind of indifferent, and Tuvok was gone before he could really get into his schooling. But there's this whole part that he talks about with his young daughter. And as we know, Vulcans are a telepathic species. And he's talking about his interaction with his daughter and how he always felt like she was very intuitive and advanced for her age. And she always seemed to, in particular, know certain things about him. And one day he realized what it was while they were having the conversation. She'd been reading his mind. So his daughter was very
What?
adept. Yeah. His
Wow.
daughter apparently was very adept at getting into his mind. And it took him, he says it took him quite a while before he realized that's what she was doing. And so then instead of like being upset about it, he was just like, he asks her, "What did you discover?" Because in the scene in the book, he's talking about like she's telling him that she's aware he's got this longing inside of him. And so he's like telling her all these things, and he's like, "Oh, now I understand why she knows all this. She's in my head. She's been here. She's, all that stuff." So his daughter's really good. Like they have a very special connection because of that. And that's what he's later alludes to as something that he's been missing is because he doesn't feel her anymore. Because before, no matter where he was or what he was doing, he could always feel his daughter in his mind. But now that they're in the Delta Quadrant, he doesn't feel her anymore. So he's feeling particularly disconnected from his
Right.
family. So I read that a long time ago, and it always made me a little sad because then I was thinking about this particular scene. And he talks about his daughter and how much he profoundly misses his family. And now knowing that little bit of backstory, I'm like, it's probably because he can't feel her anymore the way that he used to. So it just made me feel a little bit sadder for him in those moments.
Okay. Wow, there's way more to his character on that level than this episode gave us.
Yeah. That's what that book is so great. And if you ever get the chance to find it and read it, I strongly suggest that you do. You, David, I would say you have to wait until we at least get to season 5, because there are certain things they talk about in the book that if you were to read it right now wouldn't make any sense to you at all. But by
Right.
season 5, you'll be fine.
Gotcha. Very good. Got a ways to go to get there.
Yeah, but it's worth it. It's worth it. It's a great book. Neelix gets that's also a part of the Neelix redemption arc too. We find out a lot about what Neelix was up to before he met Kes, before he got involved with the Kazon. Neelix was a drug runner, as a matter of fact.
I can
and
imagine.
And then he got addicted to the substance that he was running and went through a terrible detox. Tom is responsible. We find out why Tom was in prison, which we only got like the briefest snippets of a story from in the pilot episode. But Tom was responsible for the deaths of 3 other cadets, and that's why they kicked him out of Starfleet Academy. And then he palled around for a while. It was kind of a low rent pilot mercenary for hire before he got caught. B'Elanna, her issues are from her family. Doesn't, her father's human, mother's Klingon. She grew up on a colony where she was teased relentlessly. She was kicked out of the academy for fighting. She got mixed up with the Maquis, almost died a couple times before she finally found her way to Chakotay's ship in particular. And, all that kind of stuff is in that book, and it's really worth the read. It's written by the main writer, storyboarder for Voyager, so it's all officially recognized as canon. So if you want to know the backstory of all of the characters, it's there. Now, we don't get Janeway's backstory in that one, but all the others are there. Still worth it. Well, all right. Any final thoughts on Illusion?
Just final bit. We didn't really talk too much about it, but the aliens they encounter on the outside, it was a little bit funny that they have to flip the ship over because in all of Star Trek, they always seem to have a down. They don't ever seem to really have to deal too much with the idea of like there is no down in space kind of concept. It's just the ships are always seemingly always on the same plane. Whatever they always agree on wherever the plane is. In fact, it's actually one of the reasons why I liked What was the other Cardassian space station that they went to a couple times?
Empok Nor.
Empok Nor. It was always like tilted at a different angle. I liked that. I mean, it made it look alien and off, and like, you know, it's a dead space station. But I liked that it was a different angle. So the idea that they had to flip the ship over to show submission in space, I thought was a little funny, because if you think about it, that like wouldn't make a whole ton of sense, because there's no down in space. So what would the alien think is of slipping over? Like, it didn't seem to have a downside. I'll put it that way. The alien that they were engaging with, maybe it did. I don't know.
I always just took it as the ship needs to roll.
Yeah,
it's a true show your belly so much as it is you need to roll over. We've accepted this as your whatever your current position is. You need to roll from that.
Right. Well, maybe it was the blue, giving off the blue that really mattered. They did both, but blue was what was more important.
But you bring up an interesting little side sciencey note, whatever, because there is no up or down or whatever in space. You have an orientation axis, sure, but as you travel through deep space and you know ships are making maneuvers and whatever else, pretty soon you're going to lose that whatever orientation you started from. And I mean, now you could try, I guess, to keep it, but what would be the point? No matter what planet you arrive at, you're possibly going to, you know, come at it from different angles. Now, I have my own headcanon, I guess, for how the ships always arrive in the right position.
Okay.
So when they are coming into contact with a planet, they are able to, obviously they take preliminary scans of a planet and they're able to determine the poles. And when they determine the poles of the planet, they orient themselves according to the poles. So
that would make a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to space stations and ships, for that matter, if you notice on a ship, they all have blinking lights. They have right.
That's true.
I've always, and they have them on space stations too. I've always taken it as they use the lights in a way to designate a north and south pole of a space station or a ship or whatever. And then since the ship obviously is the easier one to maneuver, the ship would then orient itself according to the lights. So like the Enterprise, if you look at it, it's got a series of lights that are like there are different colors. Like there's the white ones and they've got like some colored ones on the side. And it's the same on the underside of the saucer section. So I just always assumed that's what the lights were for. Whoever's piloting the ship, when you get close enough, you would orient your lights, your running lights, to the space station, the ship, the whatever that you're coming to. That way they line up. Not that really it matters, because, you know, no positioning is going to stop you from beaming over, or if they got to take a shuttle, from the shuttle coming around to a certain degree or whatever to do the thing. It's just purely for aesthetics. We are giving you a way to determine north and south on a ship, on a space station, on a whatever. Right. And that's just what I've always said to myself. So, whether or not that's true or not, I don't know. No one's ever said anything.
Oh, I like it. I think that makes a lot of sense, frankly. It helps with traffic patterns. I will say, though, it is funny. And again, it's not a huge critique, but I just find it funny every time a fleet of ships are together. They're always oriented the same. And then when they jump into battle, the enemy ships seem to always also have the same orientation. Again, not a huge critique. It's just a minor one, like fires in space. You know, it would be more difficult to understand the space battle if they weren't doing all that. But this is a moment where it also I noticed it and chuckled a little bit. Yeah. So
that's why it's always worked in my head too. Like when we watched Deep Space Nine and they went into the war and they were doing the battles and stuff, why all the ships lined up the way they did, because it was easier for them to use their navigational markers along the holes to get everybody lined up. And it works in order to deploy your ships with formation in mind when they all are aligned in a certain way or whatever. So that's the reason why it was important for them to have those things, because otherwise, like you said, they would just be coming in at all angles and doing
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff, which would make maneuvering almost irrelevant when you've got, ships at all kinds of degrees flying around and doing stuff.
Right.
Um, but yeah, uh, you're free to use my headcanon if you want to. Make it your own if that works for you. But it answers the question of why there are blinking lights on the ships, because again, in deep space, no one's going to see those lights. They
Right.
don't do anything else. But if you're coming up on the ship and you need to orient yourself, you have a light as a marker.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it definitely makes sense. And it's, again, true to real life. If you watch planes or boats, they have blinking colored lights to indicate which side of the ship is what, or the plane is what. So it actually makes a lot of sense compared to real life. So, yeah.
Well, all right, guys. I think that's going to do it for us on this episode of Illusion. Lots of things for you guys to go back and rewatch, see if you agree with us or not. Also, checking out The Odyssey, Strange New Worlds, all those things as well. So in the coming week, be sure to get all that done. And again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, whatever you want to throw our way, please feel free to do so. You can always send everything through to our illustrious Facebook page, which is, of course, The Fire Cakes. We're pretty easy to find. Just remember, be polite, because if you're not, we're not going to answer you. Feel free to leave messages on our videos. I have not checked for messages in quite some time, so I may go back and do that. But if I haven't answered you yet, you haven't heard from us yet, just know that's why. And in the event that something is there, we'll get to it. Well, like I said, I think it's going to do it for us on this evening. Until next time, guys, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.